Straight all day.
You're now tuned into the show where you learn the discipline to show up day after day, to do the work, the confidence to put yourself out there boldly and authentically, and the mental toughness to continue showing up, doing the work, putting yourself out there even when the success you expected to achieve has yet to be achieved. And on top of all this, you get a huge dose of personal initiative. That is a go-getter energy that moves any one of us, including yourself, to go and make things happen instead of waiting for things to happen. And then we put all this together into a series of frameworks, approaches, insights, strategies, and techniques, all underneath the umbrella of one unifying philosophy that is called work on your game. My name is Baldwin, also known as Dre All Day, and welcome to the show. And today's topic is every system, or at least the American systems that I'm talking about, are fear-based. I don't mean systems like what we do in business. I'm talking about the establishment systems. Every establishment system is fear-based. I'll explain what I mean by that and why I'm talking about it momentarily. But before we get into that, I'll remind everyone, I send out a text message every single morning for free to everyone who's in my text community. This message is guaranteed to keep you focused, sharp, and on point. If you want to be those things, so why would you not? Text me at this number, 305-384-6894, and every morning when I send out the daily motivation, you shall receive the message and you will be focused, sharp, and on point, as I said. Secondly, workonyourgameuniversity.com is where you take your next step to working with me. That's where you can get into my coaching programs, get access to all of our self-training courses. You get the physical mailings we send out every month. And if you want to work with me directly, that is the one place where it happens. Again, that is called workonyourgameuniversity.com. That's where you do that. All that said, let's get into today's topic, which is every establishment system is fear-based. I was thinking about this one morning recently after I had spoken to someone who told me that they had heard me tell the story of the birth of my son. And when I was and in the course of telling that story, I told it in two places. I did a written story about that, and then I talked about the trash that is the American medical system. That was in episode 2338. If you haven't heard that episode, you can listen to it at your convenience. You can probably find that in the feed still, or just go to workonyourgamepodcast.com. And this person was telling me that the story had resonated with them when I told that story about the birth of my son. If you didn't hear that story, listen to it so you know the full context of it. And it also got me thinking about other people who may disagree with how certain systems are run, establishment systems, that is, yet they keep operating within those systems and do not exercise their option to opt out of those systems. We all have the option to opt out of those systems, but a lot of people just don't do it. We're going to talk about all of that here today because it got me to thinking about why this is. So today we're going to explore all of that. So let's get into it. Today's topic, once again, is every establishment system is fear-based. Number one, think about what all these establishment systems do to you when you violate their protocols, or if you threaten to violate their protocols, or you attempt to violate their protocols. They all threaten you with something, and they often threaten you successfully and scare you out of your own independent streak. I mean, we all saw this. Actually, I don't even have to say that. Let me just give you each one, and then I'll give you an example, and you could probably fill in the blanks with your own examples. The medical establishment system. So that's what I mean when I say establishment. I'm talking about things like the medical system, the legal system, the education system, even the employment system in the United States. And I'm just talking about the United States because that's the area in which I have expertise. So the medical system, for example, what does the medical system threaten? If the medical system says you should do ABC, right? And you reply to someone in the establishment or to the system itself that you don't want to follow their protocol, what do? Well, they threaten you and they try to scare you into following their protocol anyway. So what they threaten is your health, your wellness, and your life. That's what they said. When my son was born, there was a doctor at the hospital who said to me that they had this long laundry list of things that they wanted to do to my son there at the hospital. And I said, well, you're not going to do any of those things. And the doctor said to me, well, if you don't allow us to do the things that we need to do, that was how she said it, that we need to do, if we can't follow our procedures, which we do to every baby that comes through here. So she was trying to basically position my train of thinking with being some kind of outside way of thinking, which again, she was trying to position it as being wrong. Then this is what she said. I fear for your son's life. And my son is perfectly fine. He's sleeping right now as I'm recording this. But I fear for your son's life if you block us from doing what we need to do. This is what the medical system does. They threaten your health, your wellness, and your life if you don't do what they say do. And any of you who's been alive for the last 3 years, you know that when that virus hit, what were you told? We were all told a whole lot of things about if you don't do this, this, and this, then your health is going to be jeopardized, your wellness is going to be jeopardized, and your life is going to be jeopardized. And then they would show you, quote unquote, proof of other people who had that exact thing happen to them because they had not quite followed the protocols. And a bunch of people bought into that. A bunch of people even bought into it so far as to demonize and attack people who didn't buy into it. And now here we are 3 years later, and we're all realizing, well, let me back up. I'm saying that, and I'm not using air quotes, so I'll use air quotes, realizing that it was all bullshit. Because a lot of what we were told ended up being the exact opposite of what we were told. Like, we were told if you put this covering on your face, that'll block anything from happening. We know that was bullshit. Then we were told if you put this experimental medicine in your body, that will inoculate you against the disease. We know that was bullshit. And we were told, oh, well, we don't even know where it came from. When, again, all of these things were told to us at the beginning, but they were labeled as conspiracy theories, or there's something wrong with you, or you're crazy, or you're on the outside of your believing these things. Now, all these things that were called conspiracy theories 3 years ago, now we know they're the actual truth. And some people knew they were the truth back then, and they stuck to that, but most people did not. Most people bought into the bullshit that they were told by the mainstream, again, the establishment system, and we all now realize that it was bullshit. The thing is, when it comes to medical things, you can't undo those. Or once you buy into it and you get something done to you, it's hard to undo it. You can't undo a jab that you put in your body. You can't undo the fact that you put a mask on your 2-year-old for 3 years straight, and maybe you're not doing it anymore. Maybe you wouldn't get another jab, but you can't undo the fact that you bought into the bullshit. And now what's happening with a lot of people, and I've seen this, I haven't called anybody out directly on it because I really have said everything I need to say about this, but at least directly to people. Now you have people who are basically creating revisionist history theories as to why them falling for the bullshit was actually a smart thing to do when it was actually stupid. But most people never admit that they were stupid. So anyway, let's just move on. So I've written and spoken about that enough that I don't need to do it again. If you want to learn more about that, I'll give you the episodes where I talked about it, because I've talked about it a lot. Anyway, the legal system. There's another establishment system. If you don't follow what the legal system wants you to do, what do they threaten? They threaten your freedom, and they threaten your God-given rights. Your rights are not granted by the government, by the way, in case any of you didn't know that. The United States government, and again, I'm just using America here because that's where I'm from. The government of the United States does not grant you rights. The government of the United States' job is to protect your rights, not to grant you rights. They don't give you rights. They protect your rights. That's their responsibility. If they're not protecting your rights, then the government's not doing their job, and they should be held to account for that. But even when they don't do that, it's hard to hold them accountable, because who are you going to go to hold them accountable? You don't really have anyone to go to. What you really would have to do is you got to build up a groundswell of support to co-sign what you're saying, which is, again, going right back to the medical establishment. There were a whole bunch of you. Some of you listen to this right now. Given the place that you work, or the place that you live, or the place that you go to school, or how you move about in your life, you may have been, or at least you felt compelled, forced to have some medical procedure done to you, something stuck in your arm, something covering your face that you did not want to go along with, but because of where you work, or because of where you go to school, or because of how you live, you felt like you had no choice but to do it. Otherwise, you would have lost maybe your ability to make money, your ability to take care of your family, or your ability to live freely and normally. And the government not only did the government not protect your rights to say no, they actually did the opposite and try to force you to not be able to say no. And some of you, I'm talking directly to you right now, and you know that I am. And the government failed you in this situation. They failed a whole lot of people in that situation. Luckily, somebody like myself, being an entrepreneur, I didn't have a certain type of lifestyle where I worked at a certain place, or I need to be in a certain office, or be around certain people where I felt like I was being compelled to do something that I didn't want to do. But even me, there was still a groundswell of support, let's just say, from well-meaning people who said, well, you should get that jab, you should cover your face with that thing. And again, I've told many stories about this, written about it, and spoken about it. So let's move on. Legal system is the second establishment I said. Third one, education system. What's the education system? Education is the establishment system. What do they threaten if you don't go along with what the educational system says? Everybody here went to school. Now, maybe some of you were the misfits in school where the teachers didn't like you because you didn't go along with the normal protocol. And maybe you were one of the students that was a quote-unquote good student. And you did everything this teacher wanted you to do. But either way, you know what the teacher would say to the kids that were the misfits. Even if you weren't the misfit, you know what they said to them. What did they say to them? Teachers would threaten us. They would even say it to you. Maybe they weren't talking directly to you. They would say it to the whole class, right? If you don't do what the educational system says, i.e. what the teacher says, what's going to happen to you? What would the teacher say to us? They would threaten your mind and they would threaten your future success. Now, if you don't do what we tell you to do here in school, you will be unsuccessful and you will be a failure in life. You're going to be working at, and they fill in the blank with some place that seems like a bad place to work. Somewhere you're not going to make a lot of money. You're not going to get a good job. You're not going to graduate. You're not going to be successful. Isn't that what they do? If you don't follow our protocol, you will be unsuccessful and your mind is going to turn into mashed potatoes. They threaten you with that. And what about employment? Especially traditional types of employment, such as if you're working in places maybe corporate or places very bureaucratic, which academia is becoming more and more like this. What do they threaten? If you don't follow what they say, what do they threaten? They threaten your ability to make money and your ability to take care of your family. All right, has any of you, I actually know some people personally who I know listen to the show, who have told me stories of this, where you had employment at some bureaucratic organization, usually corporate, not always, but usually corporate or academia based. And for whatever reason, you were not following the protocol, at least the way that the people running it wanted you to follow the protocol. And because of that, your ability to make money and take care of your family was either threatened or compromised because you weren't following protocol. And maybe it was them that was messing up, but they are the ones who set the protocol. So if you didn't go along with the program, you ended up being the one getting fucked over in the process. This happens. These 4 establishments: medical, legal, educational, and employment. Let's move on to point number 2. Today's topic, once again, is how every establishment system is fear-based. They control you by threatening you with these things. If you don't do them, then we're going to take away these things. And if you continue to not do them, they take them away and they try to hurt you with this. Point number 2. Many people agree with this first point. What I just laid out in the first point, there is really no counterpoint to what I said in the first point. We all know, I don't care what you do for a living, even if you work in the medical system, you know the medical system threatens people's health, wellness, and life if they don't follow the protocol. You know this. If you work in the legal system, you know that this is the way that you get people to comply. All right, if you don't comply, I'm gonna take you to jail. What are you doing? I'm threatening your freedom. That's what that sentence says. If you're a cop and you tell somebody, if you don't do what I say, you're gonna be arrested, you are literally threatening their freedom. Educational system. If you may not be a teacher who says this. I know there's some teachers who listen to this show. You may not be this type. I doubt that you are, but you know that there are teachers who do this. That they say to students, if you don't do what you're supposed to do here, you'll be unsuccessful. You're not gonna make a lot of money. You're gonna be a loser. You won't be. You know the things the teachers say. Employment. You don't follow us, you're not gonna make any money. You're not gonna be able to take care of your family. They don't say anything about your family, but they talk about your ability to make money, and you can draw the line to everything else is gonna happen. So almost everybody who heard what I said in point number 1 agrees with what I said, that these are real things. It is not me saying that everybody in these systems does these things. It is the system itself does it, and people just happen to work in the system, just to be clear. At the same time, while many people agree with what I said, they still blindly comply with what the system demands that you do. Now, I don't mean by saying that you keep working there, because listen, you can work as a cop and be a good cop. You can work as a teacher and be a good teacher. You can work in the medical industry and be a good person. You can work in the legal profession, or what was the other one? You can work in a corporate or academia and not be with the bullshit. I'm not saying, when I say comply, I don't mean you work there. What I mean is you actually, when they threaten you to do something, you go along with it, even though you know that they're just using that as a threat to get you to comply, even if you don't want to. That's what I mean. The legal system is the one that, for the most part, any of us could avoid most of your life. I'm not referring to getting sued, for which you don't go to jail. If you lose a lawsuit, you don't go to jail. You just have to pay money. The legal system is the one of these establishment systems that you could, based on the way you live, you could theoretically completely avoid it all of your life. But the other ones, the employment system, the health system, and the educational system, you can't really avoid these. You're going to come across them at some point or another in life. Legal system, you could go your whole life and never had to deal with them. But the other 3, not so much. And you'll have choices when you do deal with them. Most people fold and comply. I'm not saying you're bad for doing it. Again, as I said, most people do it. So if I called most people bad, I probably wouldn't have much of an audience. So most people fold and comply. And we see what happens to those who don't, do we not? They get ostracized, they get publicly attacked, they get made examples of when possible. What does that do? It drives more fear into the hearts of everybody else who has not yet made a decision, but will have a choice in the future. So when you see what happens to the people who didn't comply with the jab, or putting the mask on, or listening in school, or doing what the bosses say, you saw what happened to them. All right, you don't want that to happen to you, so let me just go ahead and comply. This is how people become compliant, because it's fear-based. Everybody get what I'm saying here? Point number 3. Today's topic, once again, is every establishment system is fear-based. Well, with all this being said, there's a lot of doom and gloom I've produced here and presented here to you. What can you do? What can you do knowing everything that I've said here, being that you understand it, and for the most part, you all agree that this is real? One thing you can do is not comply when you see everybody else complying. But the caveat, that requires courage. All right, we talked about this in yesterday's episode. This requires courage, it requires balls. And remember that courage is one of the 4 intangible assets, along with relationships, knowledge, and time. When you have those intangible assets, you buy yourself the ability to not comply when some establishment system tries to force compliance out of you. When I was in that hospital at that neonatal, what do you call it? Neonatal intensive care unit, and this doctor and all of the nurses are co-signing the doctor, trying to tell me that I should allow them to do what they want to do to my child and comply with their process. And I said, no, you ain't doing that shit. There was nobody in there co-signing me. There was nobody in there backing me up. But here's what I had. I had the balls to tell them, I don't give a damn what any of y'all say. All right, this is how it's going to go. And I also had the knowledge to ask the right questions of the right people, to where they weren't going to just walk over top of me with what they want to do. And because of that courage and that knowledge, I was able to buy enough time to get conversations with people in more power than the people I was talking to in that neonatal intensive care unit, and get things done the way that I wanted them to get done. And within 24 hours, we were out of the hospital, which was my desire from the very beginning. I stated that when we first got there. I'm not telling you that to impress you, but to impress upon you. You can do the exact same thing, but you got to have the assets. Most important one is balls. You got to have the balls to do this. When I say balls, I'm talking to the males and the females out there. Okay, this is just a metaphor. Many people usually default to their tangible resources when making decisions. So people will make a decision and say, well, I can't do X because I don't have the money. How many of you has ever said that to yourself? I want to do this thing, but I can't do it, or I won't do it because I don't have the money. How often do you say that? Or if you're in sales, how often do you have somebody say it to you? Or somebody will say, well, I would do that if I had the money, or if I could afford to do it. I would do it, but I can't because I don't have the money. Often people default to money as the reason to not do things. But remember, again, this is why I keep referring you to certain books. Robert G. Allen has a book called Creating Wealth. In that book, he talks about the 4 intangible assets. The tangible ones are cash, credit, a job, and a steady job in any type of real estate ownership. Those are tangible assets. Those are things people usually talk about when they talk about having any kind of asset. Those 4 things: cash, credit, a job, real estate. The intangible assets are courage, time, relationships, and knowledge. With those, you can get the tangible things. So if you don't have the tangible things, you need to look to your intangibles. And anybody can choose to have courage anytime that they want. You don't have to go to school to have courage. As a matter of fact, you probably have more courage the less school you went to, thinking paradoxically. So your ability to afford to do something is not about how much money you have in the bank. All right, everybody here who's ever used that as a reason to do nothing. It's about how much courage you have to actually do it. Because when you have the courage to do something, even if you need money, with courage you can go get money. See, affording things is not about money. Affording things is about your internal fortitude. And many people don't have much internal fortitude because you have been indoctrinated your entire life to not have any. Again, the systems have taught you not to have any. They have beat it out of you, and they have beat into you to just do what you're told. Just comply, just listen, don't question anything. So when it comes time to have some courage, you don't have anything to draw on because you ain't been practicing. Like, you've been practicing not having courage. So when it's time to have courage, you haven't been practicing. Or you're not in game shape. You get what I'm saying? It's like somebody never does any cardio, then you got to run away from a dog. All right, you ain't in shape. All right, you in trouble. All right, you got a problem. All right, so it is much easier to just fall in line. This is why many people spend their lives falling in line, simply because they haven't practiced doing anything else. So for the people who are actually interested in having balls, see my episodes on the subject, which I told you about, my episodes on courage, which I told you about, and most importantly, get into my Bulletproof Mindset 2.0 course, which is available at workonyourgameuniversity.com. Also got a course in there called Toughen Up. And these courses are all about having balls. They're all about having courage and putting yourself out there, as I say every day at the top of the show. you need to have the courage and the audacity to go against what the establishment is telling you to do. And what the establishment knows, they won't tell you this, but they know that if someone really is not going to comply and they can't be bullied into compliance, they will leave you alone. They will leave you alone. You notice there are people who don't follow what the establishment says. Like, I ain't the only one. There are others. And you know how they get to that position? It's because they have the balls to tell the establishment, listen, F you, I'm going to do what I want to do, and you're not going to make me do anything different. Even after the threats, they stay and they hold their ground. Many of you just don't have enough practice holding your ground. That's why you're not able to do it. It's not that you can't, it's just you haven't practiced it enough. It's like lifting weights. All right, some of you can bench press 185 pounds because you do it all the time. Some of you can't simply because you haven't practiced enough. But if you practice enough, you probably can get it. Get what I'm saying? Let's recap today's class, which is every establishment system is fear-based. I was thinking about this one morning when I was just thinking about the story of the medical system. If you didn't hear that episode, I gave it to you already. Number one, think about what they all do when you violate their protocols. They threaten you and attempt to scare you out of that independent streak. The medical system threatens your health. The legal system threatens your freedom. Educational system threatens your mind. The employment system threatens your money. Point number two, many people agree with this point while still blindly complying with it. These, except for the legal system, you pretty much cannot avoid these regardless of how you live. And what most people do is they fold and comply, and we see what happens with people who don't. They get ostracized, attacked, made examples of. So how can you fight this? This is point number three. How do you fight this? The number one thing you need is courage. You need balls. You gotta have the audacity to do so, along with relationships, knowledge, and time. These are intangible assets that anybody can build, regardless of who you are, where you are, or what tangible resources you have. You don't have to have any money to build relationships, knowledge, to have time, and to have balls. All right, you don't have to have money to do that. Now, you might think you need money, and then, again, it's the usual default excuse that people use to not do things, but you don't need money to have these things. I got a whole episode on this show titled What to Do When You Don't Have the Money. So any of you ever want to do something and you think the only reason you can't do it is because you don't have the money, please listen to episode number 2413. Okay, so you can never use that. So you never need to use that as an excuse again. I want to do this, but I can't because I don't have the money. Okay, everybody has a time in life when they want to do something, they don't have the money. Okay, I have had clients who make 6 and 7 figures a year who don't do stuff because they don't have the money, quote unquote, don't have the money. All right, money is not the reason for people to not do stuff. It is a lack of creativity, it's a lack of resourcefulness, and a lack of courage. Mostly lack of courage. All that said, text me. Tell me the best insight you got from today's class. My number is 305-384-6894. And go to workonyourgameuniversity.com. Get into that Bulletproof Mindset course, Bulletproof Mindset 2.0. That course alone is worth the entire entry fee to get into the university. I promise you. All right, the university itself, the investment to get into the university is less than the value of that course by itself. I just sold that course by itself. Is worth more than what you pay to get the entire university. I'm giving you 35 other courses. Workonyourgameuniversity.com. Work on your game. Dre all day.